Good evening, everyone. Happy Friday. I'm Elizabeth Vargas. We begin tonight with the arrest of journalist Don Lemon, a move that escalates a legal and cultural conflict between the freedom of speech and the freedom of religion that ignited 2 Sundays ago in a Minnesota church. Just moments ago, Don Lemon left a Los Angeles courtroom where he was arraigned on charges of violating federal law. He is accused of conspiring to deprive churchgoers of their rights in a house of worship. Lemon vowed that he will not be silenced.
Last night, the DOJ sent a team of federal agents to arrest me in the middle of the night for something that I've been doing for the last 30 years, and that is covering the news. The First Amendment of the Constitution protects that work for me and for countless of other journalists who do what I do. I stand with all of them, and I will not be silenced.
Lemon's arrest late last night came after 2 judges rejected the DOJ's attempt to bring charges. 3 other people and another journalist and 2 protesters were also arrested and charged. It all ties back to January 18th when Lemon went inside the city's church in St. Paul, Minnesota. He says he was there to cover anti-ICE protesters who proceeded to disrupt a church service. They chose this particular church, they say, because one of the pastors there is also a local ICE official.
ICE out! ICE out! Fight back! Stand up! Fight back!
You are preaching the word of God while dressed in a suit. Did Jesus
Stand up! Fight back!
No, he didn't. You are a fake pastor.
Don Lemon said at the time in his live broadcast that he was there as a journalist, not as a protester. Jesse Weber, legal analyst and host of Jesse Weber Live here on NewsNation, and Chris Starwalt, NewsNation political editor and host of The Hill Sunday. Great to have you both here. Jesse, I'm going to start with you. The DOJ says Don Lemon was conspiring to deprive rights and interfere with someone's religious freedom in a house of worship. Lemon claims, I was just doing journalism. How strong is the case against him?
I didn't know what it was going to be until I saw this indictment, and I think the key...
Which was just released a very short time ago.
I would encourage everybody to go to page 4. I think the most important part, when you talk about a conspiracy, there has to be a criminal agreement between everybody. There's an understanding. They allege that there was a pre-op briefing in a shopping mall. Now, what does that mean? Did Don Lemon have any kind of coordination, assistance, knowledge about what was going to be happening in this church? If that's the case, that is where you may cross the line from a passive observer into an active participant. And if there was an understanding and there was more allegations that he wouldn't reveal about where they were going, you played the video about him allegedly obstructing people from leaving. These are what, again, go to beyond the line of what questionable journalistic ethics versus a potential crime. Now, I'm not saying this is a slam dunk case at all, but now I have a better understanding of how prosecutors say they have the evidence that he was trying to deprive people of their right to practice their religion.
In Lemon's live stream, he shows himself in a car with his crew, and they're talking about where they're going, and they know they're going to a church. And I mean, Lemon seems to be a little bit coy about revealing the name of the church on the live stream, but he clearly knew where he was going, what was going down.
Yeah, and I don't know if that part of it is going to be the end-all, be-all of it. I mean, if he
journalists all the time get tips that something's going down.
And he can go there, and he can report, and he can record, although you and I had an interesting conversation in today's day and age. If I took out a cell phone and put the camera on, am I a journalist? But again, I hear what you're saying.
All right, Chris, the DOJ tried to get 2 judges to sign an arrest warrant for Don Lemon. Both judges refused, so the DOJ got a grand jury to indict him. The Trump administration clearly really wanted this arrest. Why?
I can only imagine that it's because the president really dislikes Don Lemon. Or maybe it's a good trophy. Maybe it's a way to say to base voters who are upset about what the administration had to say about the Second Amendment, that they go after a loathed person of the recent past on the First Amendment. But I have to tell you both. I have to say it. You don't need a license to be a journalist. And we definitely don't want to get in the place where we say to the federal government, you tell us when we're practicing journalism, and then we will comply. The First Amendment, we are the only profession, vocation that's mentioned in the Constitution. We're the only one. That's cool. But the First Amendment isn't for us. The First Amendment just is. And Don Lemon is not my kind of journalist. I don't know that what he was doing there would meet any definition of journalism. But I think we have to be very careful about when we start talking about, does the federal government get to decide what is legitimate and what is illegitimate when it comes to journalism?
Yeah, because here, Chris, are the facts. Around 60% of Americans get their news from some sort of platform on social media. For young adults, it's 85%. They get their news mostly on TikTok. And these platforms are populated by these so-called influencers who are there to get clicks and monetize it, and who call themselves journalists, but who very often blur that line between reporting facts and pushing a point of view.
Well, I want clicks too, right? And I hope everybody subscribes to whole hog politics. I want the clicks, but I have to develop a trust with my audience that I say, okay, these are the rules that I play by. And then over time, I have to demonstrate that I can be consistent.
Yeah.
And whether or not somebody wants to go to Don Lemon as a trusted news source, I don't recommend that. I do not recommend. I don't think that would be a good idea to have that be the feedstock. But I don't think the government should be interposing itself in the choices. I don't know about, Jesse knows about this prosecution as a criminal matter and its likelihood to succeed. But I don't want this administration to say Don Lemon's not a journalist any more than I want the next administration to say Joe Rogan's not a journalist. It's just speech. Speech is speech.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.